Hi, Chris. So, what will the Catalyst buyer see on Saturday in their hangar?
Okay, just let me translate it for a second.
So, well, the very first version of the hangar, which every backer will be able to download and have on their machine next week on Thursday. We're going to show it on Saturday at the event. Only has the first 5 ships that we announced in the campaign. The Cutlass will be later, probably in a month or 2, because we're still building it in the engine, so it's not finished fully in the game. So at the moment, it's just the Aurora, the 300i, the Hornet, the Freelancer, and the Constellation. The ships that you'll see in the later ships will come along over the next 3, 4, 5 months.
How different is it funding the game from Wing Commander?
Oh, how different is it me getting the game funded this way than when I did Wing Commander in the old days?
Okay. Now we got it.
Right. So it's pretty different because when I made Wing Commander, it was a very different time. So I made that as a freelancer, and I spent maybe $100,000 for extra time, resources to work on it, versus Star Citizen. In today's world, you build something, you have to have all this detail, all the ships. So the actual game itself is going to cost about $20 million. So it requires a lot more money to do it at the fidelity that we're doing. But I don't mind, because the world's a lot more detailed and cool. So, so I get it. So you're worried about how we're dealing with projectiles because EVE Online has problems, even though it has simpler, it just straight laser bolts. Right. Okay. So I understand this question now. All right, I'll come back over.
Michael.
Okay, so my answer is that we're pretty different than EVE Online because our scale's much smaller. So EVE Online has battles with thousands of ships. You should think about Star Citizen in any one combat. It's going to be closer to something like Battlefield 3 or 4. So we're not quite sure how many people we can have in one area to fight. That's why we're doing this, we're calling it the Dogfight module. That'll be the end of this year, which will just allow the players to take the ships they'll have in the hangar module in space, fight against other players. No story, no big persistent universe, but we're going to use it to balance the gameplay and test how many ships we can have, what the issues are. So we're concerned, we want to make sure it's fun and you have the fidelity that you have for proper dogfighting. So in that case, the answer is we're probably going to have a lot less ships, and I don't know whether it's somewhere between 30 or 100 ships in one area, but we'll cap it at a much lower number than EVE because our detail, it's much more first person and stuff. So that's the way that we solve the problem.
Hi, Chris. I have 2 questions about countermeasures. In Freelancer and modern fighter jets have flares to avoid missiles. But in Freelancer, you also could avoid missiles by flying skill. And I wanted to ask if you will be able to avoid missiles by flying skill in Star Citizen.
So the answer would be a qualified yes. So generally, missiles have a better turning radius than a bigger ship. But if you were smart enough to have a missile following you and you pull up at the last minute and maybe there's another ship in the way, you could probably lead it into another ship. And it also depends on the missile. So we have missiles that are heat-seeking, image recognition, all the rest. So some are easier to fool, some aren't. But a certain amount of flying skill would definitely help you out.
So the question is whether you will be able, in the online galaxy of Star Citizen, to play by yourself, like the same way you played Freelancer before.
When online.
Well, while being online.
So. So the way the game's set up is that when you're online, if you want to have a more personal experience, you can tell the game that you don't want to see so many other players, and it will put you in space with other AI versus other players, or it will put you in space with players that won't be hostile to you. So you won't have to engage. If in most of this space, depends on some areas on the outside of the galaxy, that it's dangerous, and if a player wants to attack you, they can play you, but a large part of the galaxy is sort of a safer area, and if you don't want to engage in PvP, the game will deliberately not match you with other players that would attack you. So that experience should feel much more like privateer or freelancer.
Hi, Chris. My question is, if you are in a big clan or guild, is it possible to build a space station as a point of defense or from where you can start colonize other planets?
So you definitely will be, as a big clan, able to control a space station, asteroid base. We have certain what we call persistent locations in space, and we're not sure whether you can build them yet. You'll definitely be able to capture them or maybe buy them, and we're considering the ability to have clans make money so they can build these, whatever you want to think of them, like a space fortress or something. But also the other part of the gameplay is they're always going to be in space and vulnerable. So if you're a clan and you have this, you have to make sure that you're protecting it all the time, because someone may, like if everyone's in bed and you don't have NPCs protecting it, and some other clan could come and steal it from you. But it's part of one of the dynamics we want in the universe, to have conflict between the different player groups. So basically the story of the universe is partly generated by all the players.
Okay, so just one question I got back to you is, will this be, you won't be able to do this from the start, right?
You mean from the very beginning of the game, or?
Yeah, will you have this option from the very beginning of the game?
From the beginning of the final game, there will be locations that you can capture as a group, and then you just need to run and hold on to. But you won't, I mean, as an individual, you could even capture them, but there's no chance you're ever going to be able to hold on to it. So generally, a big group, this will be what I think big groups would fight over in the universe.
Mm-hmm. Guilds. Can you say a little bit how you're going to support guilds or clans within Star Citizen?
Well, so there was a little bit of what we were talking about, being able to hold on to large parts of persistent real estate, which would be useful. Like if you're a pirate guild, if you have an asteroid base that you can keep your missiles and weapons and supplies on, and it's close to a trade lane, it makes you a better pirate clan to attack the trade lanes. So we're definitely going to have locations around the universe that will be built for large group play. And we're sort of building, so the way that we're thinking with Star Citizen is that we're building it for someone that wants to play as a single player, someone that wants to play with a small group of friends, so think of that more like the Battlefield model where you and 3 or 4 of your friends, and then we're also building gameplay that works for a large group of people. And there's different objectives and things for them to do. So the idea is, just like in real life, you know, people can be lone wolf or they could work as part of a group. But you know, we're going to allow the bigger groups to own, say, a factory, like an economic node on a planet, so maybe get more involved in controlling the commerce or controlling an area of space. So there's definitely gameplay for the various groups, including big guilds. The other thing that I'll add is that later this year, we're rolling out a feature on the website, the community site, that will allow organizations, so you can start your own group and have people join, and you can have your own private forums, and you can have multiple ones of those, and those organizations will carry across into the game. So that's how the guilds and the groups will get formed, that the game will know. And later on in the hangar, you'll be able to invite friends in your organization to come visit your hangar and stuff. So we're building good support for that.
He said was whether there will be trade shows for spaceships, like the Gamescom is a trade show for games.
Yes, that's a great idea. But they're definitely going to be live events. So like one of the big goals in Star Citizen is the universe itself lives. So I've already talked about how your character has a lifeline and you get older and at some point you die and your next of kin take over. So we're going to have a progression of time, and then also there'll be events where the universe itself will change, the politics will change, and players can get involved in the different actions that maybe influence what happens. So it's very much meant to be a living universe that's partly determined by what the players do, and then we see what the players do, and then we write some extra fiction and build it into it, so everyone feels like their efforts are helping shape the universe.
Discovering jump points. What can we do as an explorer?
There's quite a few extra things that we're doing for explorers. So I mean, actually, one thing that's interesting for everyone here is that when we did the initial crowdfunding, we did a survey for all our backers to say, what do you want to do in the game? Do you want to be a bounty hunter, a pirate, a merchant, a explorer? And And I was thinking, well, maybe most people like to have combat. But actually, 67% of the people that responded wanted to be explorers. So, which was really kind of cool. So based on that, we actually started to think about more things that we can do for explorers, and that's actually kind of one of the great things about having the community part of the development so early. You sort of know what's important to people. So besides just discovering jump points, there's a lot of extra stuff where any system will have some areas that are basically charted. There's a lot of areas that you'll have to fly into space to map. And you can maybe discover like an asteroid field, and that asteroid field may have minerals in it. And then you can, as you map it, it will show up on your navigation map in your computer, and you can send those points to your friends, or you could potentially sell them to a store for them to sell everyone else, and you can get a royalty for it. So you can do mapping beyond just discovering jump points. And there's some other things that we're working on the exploration, but basically there's a fair amount of sort of discovery that we're going to let explorers. So the idea is that almost 70% of the actual usable space is unexplored. And so the explorers can sort of fly around, and a lot of it may just be empty space, but then you'll occasionally find something special, an alien wreck, or an asteroid field, like I said, with mineral field. And you'll have that. Do you want to share it with your friends or not?
One personal question I got about that is whether you can name systems you discover.
Well, it sort of depends. So like, for instance, on a jump point, when you discover it, you can file your claim. Now, if you file the claim, it can be named after you. But if you file the claim, it becomes public. So you always have this dilemma: do you want to keep it private and only for you or your friends? But if you keep it private and someone else discovers the same jump point and they file a claim, then it'll be named after them instead of you.
Okay.
So it's sort of up to you when you discover things whether you want to share it with the world or not.
Okay. We kind of answered a part of that already, whether you can build your own space stations and expand those space stations with different modules, and whether you're able to build traders into those stations where you can sell goods by your own prices.
Yes, okay, so we're going to allow players to own some of the economic node. Like, so in our game we call a store or a factory an economic node. So we're going to allow players to own some economic nodes and even maybe build and create some economic nodes. But it's going to be, obviously if we have 2 million or 3 million people, everyone can't own one of these. So it's going to be something that you work towards, maybe is expensive, is difficult, or there's only a limited number of slots on any one planet. But we are definitely going to allow players to do that, and people will have their own version of, if they want to go to one side of the galaxy and collect a really good, powerful gun, and then take it and have a store on the other side of the galaxy that sells them, then you can do that. So like in real life, we're looking to have like different items around the universe. You have to go to the planets to buy them. But maybe someone makes a business out of finding the interesting things and collecting them and having their own store that they sell to other people with. So we're trying to have that kind of gameplay in there as well.
Is it possible for a clan only, or can I also own those stations or those shops as a single person?
No, a single person will be able to do it. It doesn't need to necessarily be a clan. I mean, so it just sort of depends. There'll be different levels. So, the bigger enterprises, you may need a clan because it's more expensive. But definitely we're going to allow people to have their own, equivalent of a mom and pop store.
Okay. But the question is whether there will be randomly generated missions in the single-player part, and single-player campaign as well, in Squadron 42, or whether there will only be story missions which are pre-made by you.
Okay. So Squadron 42 is like Wing Commander. So it's a design narrative story. So there won't be randomly generated missions. I think we have some cases where occasionally you can leave the story path and do a side mission, and there's different options for that, but they're all designed. In the game Star Citizen, there is a combination of procedural, randomly generated missions, and also specific story missions. So I would say that Star Citizen, even though it's multiplayer, if you play it, it should actually feel, and you just only want to be more like freelancer single player, it will feel to you kind of like freelancer single player, and you'll have that same experience. But in the Squadron 42 part of the game, it's like Wing Commander. It's a very specific narrative experience, but it does branch. So it's not linear. You can take this way or this way, and depending on the path, or here you have, there's different wingmen, and you can get friendships and not have friendship with them, and that will determine which way that story branches. But it is a beginning and an end. It's not random like Freelancer was for the missions.
There's some question, how far is the playability of ships, like maybe because in the video we always see the fighter class, and maybe a carrier class if it's possible to control, to exchange the hangar, like putting in bombers to bomb planets or other asteroids, or maybe also infantry units like tanks to conquer a planet or something like that. I don't know how far it is.
The game as it begins, there will not be combat on the planets. Later on, since this will be online and over many years we'll add stuff, that's actually one of the features we want to add. There is combat, first-person combat, and for shipboarding, so you're fighting for a ship first person. There's combat in space, and you can fly different levels of ships, so you can fly everything from a small fighter, which you sort of see in the trailer, but you can pilot everything up to a big carrier.
Oh.
And you can have, and so it's designed so you can have your experience flying by yourself, or maybe 3 or 4 of your friends flying a bigger ship like a Millennium Falcon size ship, or even a much bigger ship where maybe there's 8 or 10 of you that all have to crew it together and fly fighters and work in concert. So that's actually one of the things that I'm proudest of in the game, is the idea of working, the cooperative, having your friends and the different ships, but all with the same level of detail as you have for the small ship.
Okay, you actually answered both questions already. Part of the second question also was how the roles on board a carrier will be distributed between players. So what roles can players take on board a carrier?
Okay, so on a bigger ship, obviously there'll be the role of someone that's piloting the ship. But like on the equivalent of a sort of a carrier-style ship, so we have a ship, there's a Corvette right now that is the biggest ship that a player can have at the moment. That has like a combat information center, so you can see like this hologram of where the fighters from your ship are, and you, as the player sitting in that seat, will say, you fighter attack this, you fight, so you're in charge of them. Then other players will go to a turret and run the guns, or maybe someone goes down and makes sure the engine's working. So basically the roles will be distributed like you imagine if you watch Star Trek and the different people sitting at the different stations. The same thing happens in our big ships.
All right. Okay, the question is whether it will be only possible to fly from star system to star system via jump gates, or whether you can also fly through open space. For example, the jump gate is being blockaded by bandits or pirates.
So you will not be able to go from star system to star system without going through a jump point, mainly because they're many, many, many light years apart, and we're not allowing anyone to fly in real-time space quicker than like 0.2 of a light year. Inside the system, you can either fly just straight, or you can do what we call autopilot or warp, so you can jump from areas. So if you remember Wing Commander or Privateer or even Freelancer, you can sort of warp to an area, so you don't have to sit there flying all the time. But between star systems, you have to go through a jump point. But we're probably going to make it so you can't blockade a jump point very easily, especially in controlled space. So people can't choke it off that easily. But that's a balance thing that we have to do for the game.
Hi, Chris. I've got a question about the destructibility of the environment. For example, when you are in an asteroid field, in Freelancer, the asteroids were nearly indestructible, the big ones. Will they be destructible in Star Citizen? For example, when you are followed by another player, you destroy an asteroid and the player behind you has to evade the debris?
So, yeah, the asteroids will be destroyable, and if you blow one up and there's debris like the Star Wars chase to the asteroids, you'll have to avoid it. The only thing I'll say is that the game won't, unless it's a really big asteroid, it won't remember the persistence. Like if you go away and come back like the next day, then probably you won't have all the little bits of the asteroid, just because that's really difficult to do. So you'd remember on the big side. But in any combat or battle, yes, the asteroids are destroyable and can break apart, and you would have to avoid chunks that would get in your way.
The question is about the credibility of the universe. An example he gave was that your spaceships look like they are manufactured like cars and designed like cars. And there is really an industrial design philosophy behind them, which you're also posting on our website. And the question behind this is whether you will be expanding that or whether you can even imagine working together with people who work in actual real-world industries to get this kind of real-world industrial feeling into the game. So you have really a feeling of corporate design in the game, not only applying to spaceships, but also to logos in the game, to factories, and so on.
So no, definitely that's deliberate in the game. The big difference between this and my older games is because we have the level of detail, you can be inside, you can sit down, you can use things, you move around inside. We have to figure out, can you fit? How do you get in? Where do the landing wheels go? All these things that in the past you never had to worry about. So there actually is a lot of industrial design that goes on. And a lot of times when we look at designs, we're like, OK, but how do you get in? Or where does the canopy close? So we do that. Right now, we actually have a combination of we use a lot of people that design for movies like Avatar or Star Wars. And there is a certain amount of their design that is kind of industrial because even when you build a prop, the actor has to get into it and all that. So we do that, and we definitely will work with. So we have some designers that also do industrial design, and they are contributing. So that happens at the concept stage. Once it gets finished, then the game artists take that and put it into the engine and texture it. But it's a big part. So we're thinking like we even have several artists. All their job is to do logos for all the companies in the universe. And we have to do logos because, like on a movie, if you did a big movie, there would be people designing the logos to go on all the walls. And we do exactly the same thing because we're trying to make it as real and tangible as possible. And that was one of the things I brought back from my time at movies to what we're trying to do in Star Citizen, to make the world as believable. In movies, they say suspension of disbelief. And that's what we're trying to do in Star Citizen.